Good morning, everyone. It is the morning of the 4th of June, 2024. It's a very nice day outside. I've got the day off, so I'm going to play around with my project car a little bit today. Just detail work. I'm doing some small things today, or attempting to do some small things. The other day when I tested my new automatic temperature control box that Tony Bolin sent me, it worked beautifully, but I discovered that one of my registers, air conditioning registers, air was not blowing out of it. It's one of the ones behind that dash panel that holds the clock. So I'm going to be pulling that out today and seeing if I can find it. Hose has to be disconnected because air is coming out of the other one and actually the other three. So I'll take a look at that. It should be a simple fix. I may or may not leave that panel off because I recently found, at what I thought was a reasonable price, I found a company called Main Street Classic Car Clocks. They have an eBay store, and they actually advertised a clock for this car, restored to original working condition. It's not converted to quartz movement or anything like that. It's the original clock, and they guarantee their work. It looks beautiful. And like I said, the price I thought was reasonable. So I went ahead and ordered one, just because I like to have a working clock, even though it's, that's kind of a really small detail thing, but I like having a working clock, so I'm gonna get one. I also finally decided to just do it. I'm gonna get the air conditioning working on this car too. I mean, we're heading into summer. Why not? It's not really as expensive as I thought it would be. I found a store on eBay, another store called PhD Auto Parts. They're out of Dover, Delaware. They have a compressor on there that I found that will fit my car. I didn't notice at first that it had a double pulley on it, two V-belts instead of one, and I went ahead and ordered it, and then I caught it before they shipped it, and I canceled it because I told them I need one with a single pulley. And they wrote back and said, we'll cancel your order, but it turns out we do have one of these that has a single groove pulley on it. We just don't have it advertised. So he said, just reorder the same one, specify in your notes that you need a single pulley one, and they'll send that one to me instead. So I did. I should have it by the end of this week, by Friday, so that's pretty exciting. I also ordered a new receiver dryer from Old Air Products. I also found them on eBay. I think I've bought stuff from them in the past as well. They're a good company. So since the system still has a charge on it, still under pressure with the old R12 refrigerant in it, before I break any of the lines apart to install that receiver dryer and my new compressor, I'm going to take the car, once I've got it on the road again, to my mechanic and have him evacuate the system, get the R12 out of it, and leave it empty so I can then install my new receiver dryer, my new compressor. Then I'll take it back to him, have him convert it to R134A at that point, and hopefully it'll be good to go. And speaking of getting the car back on the road, my new bearing and seal for the axle bearing back here should be showing up late today, late afternoon, somewhere around there. If my mechanic shop's still open when it comes, I'll immediately take my axle over there with a new bearing and have him get that pressed on in the next couple days, hopefully, and then I can install it. And of course, I'll put the seal in right away once I have it in my hands. So I'm looking forward to that. Couple of other minor things I'm looking at doing today, possibly. I had mentioned this in the past, in the last week or two. I bought some high temperature sealant for the exhaust flanges, the connecting points. It's a red RTV type sealant that withstands very high exhaust temperatures, so it'll be perfect for these flanges. They all seem to have just a tiny little leak. You can just see the little tiny drops of water dripping out of them when the car is running, that kind of a thing. Don't really hear anything, but I know it's not a perfect seal. So I'm just going to go ahead and slim it down to one gasket at each joint, and then coat each side of that gasket with this sealer, and bolt them back up. So that's something I'm hoping to do today. Also related to air conditioning, now that I've decided to finish this up and get the air conditioning working, I have an AC solenoid, that one that mounts in the back of the carburetor, that bumps up the idle speed, by 50 RPM or whatever it is, so that your engine doesn't bog down while the air conditioning is running when you're sitting at idle. So I have that still on the old carburetor, so I'm going to remove that, install it on this carburetor, and test it, and hopefully it works. I hope it does. It's at least all there. It's not broken or anything as far as I know, so hopefully it works, and we'll try that out, make sure it works. And I also found someone who rebuilds the cruise control servos on these cars and other cars too. He seems to specialize more in GM products, but he also does other manufacturers' products like Fords and whatnot, and specifically the Dana Perfect Circle cruise control servos that this car has. He has a YouTube video. His name is George Borelli, and I found him on YouTube. And he has one that he showed, but it's a little bit different than the one that I have. It's not as complex as the one that I have, but it looks very similar. He has an eBay store as well. So I sent him a message, and he says he rebuilds these. So I'm hoping that he'll respond. He's in Florida. He was in Colorado, but he moved to Florida a few years ago, I guess. But he seems very knowledgeable. He's actually written a book, too, that's for sale out there that talks about these servos and how to troubleshoot them and rebuild them and all that kind of stuff. So I'm very hopeful that he might be willing to rebuild mine if I send it to him, if he doesn't already have one on the shelf. So I'm waiting for a response on that. So that's it for the intro stuff. So I'm going to start with, I guess I'm going to start with that AC solenoid on the carburetor. I'm going to start with that. So here's my old carburetor, and here's the solenoid that I was just talking about. I didn't realize, I'd forgotten that I'm actually missing the little plastic elbow that goes right here. That's the intake. You know, it takes filtered air from inside the carburetor housing through the filter, air filter, and routes it directly here. And then when this solenoid activates, it opens this up and lets air flow directly on the bottom into the carburetor, boosting the idle speed. Same idea as the air idle speed screw on the original Carter AFB design here. That also adjusts. That's not on the 1406 models, modern 1406 carburetors. They don't have that anymore, but they do have a port back here. It's got a screw in it right now, or a plug, so I should be able to just undo that and install this. I will have to lift the carburetor off the intake manifold, though, to get enough clearance. There's no way I'll be able to install this without removing the carburetor, but I'll deal with that. Before I do that, though, I'm going to apply 12-volt power to this, and hopefully I'll hear an audible click or something. I've never actually checked one of these before, but I'm assuming I should be able to hear something happening when I apply 12 volts to this terminal here. We'll find out in a minute here. Alright, so I've been working on testing this little solenoid. It definitely clicks when I apply power to it like this. I don't know if you can hear it or not. So it definitely clicks. The problem is when I apply vacuum to it, regardless of any position of the solenoid, it just sucks the air right through it. So I don't think this thing is working. Even when I put my finger on the end here to seal it off, it still doesn't hold. So I'm pretty sure I've got a leak in here. I actually don't know how this is supposed to work, but I'm assuming that when the air conditioning is not on, therefore there's not power being applied here, the solenoid should have the valve closed and there should not be any air at all passing through this. And I'm assuming this part that goes in the carburetor here should be a vacuum, because I don't know how else it would get air coming through from the air filter housing through into here unless there were a vacuum. It certainly doesn't inject air from the air horn down into it. It's got to pull it in via vacuum. And since I'm pulling air in, whether or not that valve is activated or not, I'm pretty sure there's something wrong with the valve in here. So since it's got a couple screws on it and I don't think it's working right anyway, I'm going to take those screws off and have a look inside, see if I can figure something out. So here's the inside of this little valve. It's a very simple device. This is the where the solenoid is, and there's a spring in here that keeps this sealed. Normally it keeps it sealed so that air can't flow through into the carburetor. My theory is that this spring that's supposed to keep this pressed tightly against that opening is weak. This feels very weak. So I suspect that's probably why it's not really sealing like it's supposed to be. And you can see how this thing operates visually just by applying power. Watch what happens. See that? It gets sucked in and then it pops back out because I don't have the cover on. But so the solenoid itself does work and it does pull it in like it's supposed to, but the spring feels very weak to me. So I'm going to see if I can talk to one of the aftermarket people like Lincoln Land or somebody like that, see if they can help me out with one that's in better condition that works. All right, I just did some research about these solenoids. the Edelbrock actually makes new ones that would work on my carburetor here, but they're $250, and they didn't have a lot of positive reviews. It looks like they tend to fail in fairly short order, and for that kind of money, I'm just not worth spending that money. So then I called Lincoln Land to ask about the one that I have, the original design, and he confirmed what I found on mine as far as how they work. And he said they just basically clean them up, and they use, if they need to, they use some uh, valve compound for cleaning valve seats to try and clean up the sealing surfaces and that little valve in there I showed you earlier to get them to seal better. But he suggested I just install it and try it out, see how it does, because if the leak isn't that bad, it probably won't bother the engine too much. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and install it and just test it out just to see how it does. If I can't get the idle to adjust correctly with that thing on there, that means it's bleeding too much air into the carburetor and I can't compensate for it, and I don't want to leave it like that. It probably will affect my mixture a little bit, that I may have to adjust the mixture screws, but the main thing I want to see is if it'll actually bump the idle up like it's supposed to when the air conditioning system is on. So first I'm going to test the wire that's behind the carburetor, make sure it gets power when the air conditioning system is supposed to be on. I already checked the one that runs the compressor and I know it works. And then I'll, assuming I get power there like I'm supposed to, I'll go ahead and put that solenoid on there and see what it does. Alright, it took a couple of hours. This is one of those things where it's just time consuming to get what I need from the store. The opening on the back of this carburetor, as I pointed out earlier, is larger than the original carburetor, so I had to get an adapter fitting. I visited 5 stores before I finally found what I needed at Home Depot. That Home Depot had was a very nice brass fitting section, adapter section. Had exactly what I needed. So it's a 1/4 inch on the male side by 1/8 inch on the female side, and everything matches up perfectly with the threads. So I'm just going to screw this into the back of the carburetor, screw this fitting in, and then I'm going to have to lift up the carburetor from the intake manifold in order to get this installed. But finally getting some progress, and all this just to test it out and see if it even works. Alright, a couple more little detail things. The old carburetor sitting right here had these 2 little connections here you could use to provide an air source for that valve, which is laying right here right now. This new carburetor doesn't have anything like that. But what it does have over on the side here, it has a little port that I can use to hook a line to, which I will use. There was a screw on the end of it, a plug. I just took it out just now, but you can see the barbed raised ends. It's obviously designed for a hose, a vacuum hose, or just a hose to go on there. So I'll use that as my source. So I won't have the original design, which had a little plastic piece right here, elbow, that went right to it like that. Instead, there'll be a hose going from here over to here. So that should work just fine. Also, I tested the wire right here. I tested to make sure there was, in fact, 12 volts there when the AC switch is on, and there is. So far, so good. Alright, I'm done now. I had to lift the carburetor up a bit, but it wasn't too bad. At least I didn't have to disconnect the fuel line. That was good. So you can see it in place now, the solenoid. Got my electrical connection made. You can see where I've hooked the vacuum line up there. It's a nice tight fit on both ends, so that's not going to leak. It is sticking up a little bit, but the air cleaner will push down on it. That's not going to hurt anything, so I'm not worried about that. I suppose if I really wanted to be anal about it, I could use a right angle fitting like I did there, but right now I'm not too worried about that. I think that's going to be fine. So I'm going to clean up a little bit, put all the things away that are sitting on the fender here, and start this car up, let it warm up a little bit, and then we're going to give it a test, see what happens. Alright, the results of the test are inconclusive. Actually, I don't think that solenoid did anything at all. What I discovered was that when I put my finger right here on the intake where it's pulling air in to that through this valve back here, I had a strong vacuum even when the air conditioning system wasn't even on. And when I turned it on, nothing changed as far as the idle goes. So that tells me that solenoid is not sealing well at all when there's no power to it. So there's no effect when you do apply power, because it's already pulling so much vacuum as it is. It's not doing any good. So that was kind of a waste of time. I mean, it didn't hurt anything, but it certainly didn't do what it was designed to do, which was to increase idle speed. Now I already have it idling fairly fast as it is. So what I may do is slow down the idle, because I've got it idling like 950 RPMs at idle just because it's a lot smoother that way. But I think what I'm going to do is slow that idle down and then run this test again. All right, this is take 2 on this next clip. I thought I was recording a minute ago, but it turns out I wasn't. Anyway, I just wanted to wrap up the air conditioning work that I was doing earlier. That solenoid thing, that whole exercise, I guess it really wasn't worth it, but at least now I know that solenoid doesn't really work. And I'm not even sure if it would work if it was operating properly, because when I put my finger on the input to cut off the airflow, it doesn't seem to affect the idle speed. It should slow it down, but I didn't really discern a difference. I'm thinking I might invest in a digital tachometer, because this analog tachometer I have is old and it's hard to discern small changes in idle speed. So maybe there is something going on and I just don't realize it. But I do know that solenoid is not functioning anyway. It leaks like crazy, so it's really not having an effect. So I just kind of left it as is for now, and I'm happy to report that I did receive my wheel bearing, my axle shaft bearing, and I'm in the process. I already took it to my mechanic, the shaft and the bearing. He's going to press that on. Hopefully that won't take too long. Maybe I'll have it back in a day or two, I hope. And in the meantime, right now, I'm going to install the new seal that came with it as well. It's just a standard National Oil seal. There it is, sitting on the ground. Good place for it, right? And here's the part. Here's the part number in case anybody needs it. So here's my my little set that I bought last fall that I used to install the freeze plugs, and I'm going to use it to install my seal into the bore there on the axle. Something else I keep meaning to mention. I was looking while the car was running earlier when I was working on the air conditioning. I looked underneath the car and I no longer see any evidence of water dripping out of those flanges in the exhaust system. So rather than take anything apart and put that high temp sealer in there, I'm just going to leave it for now and keep an eye on it. It may be that it behaved just like that gasket on the engine, where the overflow tank or the fill tank attaches to the intake manifold, how that leaked at first, and then it magically sealed itself up. So maybe something similar happened here. Maybe that's just what happens with flanges. I don't know. But anyway, right now it doesn't look like there's any leaks, so I don't see any point in breaking those flanges apart just to put some sealer in there. So I'm just going to keep an eye on that. There we go. All right, I'm set here to install this seal. I've already got it sitting in the bore. I just loosely stuck it in there just to make sure it's sitting square like it needs to be. And I've used my biggest one of these seal installers that I have. It's pretty close to the size I need anyway. The idea is you want to use the biggest one you can, so you're hitting it square on without hitting the side or the bore of the shaft or the hole that you're trying to get into. Pretty straightforward. So all I got to do is put this up and just drive it in. There is a lip on the inside that'll keep me from pushing it in too far. So here we go. Okay, it went in a little bit crooked, so got to get it on the bottom here. Oh wow, it's going in crooked. That ain't good. I'm not sure why it's doing that. That's interesting. I don't usually have that problem. Maybe oh, you know what? Ha! It's too big. That was my fault. I should have made sure it fit in the bore, and I didn't. So, I actually caused myself a problem. Learn from my mistake. I used one size too big. So let me reset here and try a slightly smaller one. There we go. Okay, I can tell by the sound that we're in all the way. And if I feel in here with my finger, yep, I feel it resting right against that lip that's in there to keep it going in too far. So, and since I got my finger wet with oil, I'm just going to go ahead and wipe the lip here on the seal. That needs to be done anyway. So that's it. That seal is now in place and ready to go. So I just need to wait for my mechanic to finish with the axle shaft, and I'll be able to install it. In fact, I think I'm probably going to wrap up. I don't think he's going to have it done today. And I don't know that I really have the energy to do anything more. I may play with that register in the dash. I'm not sure yet. As you can see, I've got the dash partly torn apart here. I got that panel loose. I took out the glove box too so I could see inside there. There's no indication that the hose is disconnected anywhere as far as this is the register right here, the one on the left, that there's no air coming through it. And I just started the car just now and turned it to the air conditioning position, and as before, I get air coming out of those two registers and the one on the far right, but not the one right here. So I guess it must mean that that distribution box, I don't even know what to call it, plenum, something, I don't know what to call it. There must be something obstructing it or stuck inside of it. I sure wish I had known about that when I had the dash all torn apart last year. Probably could have addressed it easily back then. It may be almost impossible to do it now. However, I'm going to go look at my shop manual, see if there's any clues in there about what might be going on. All right, after I looked at my shop manual, the plenum chamber, as it's called, is basically just a big box that distributes air equally to all four registers or the defroster or the heater vents, depending on the position of the various vacuum motors that are in the system. And so I pulled this panel off the rest of the way, and I was reminded that I actually have a burned out light bulb. One of these dash lights for the night lights is out, so now I get to replace it. Also the clock, when my new clock comes in, my replacement clock. But anyway, so I looked inside the hose, and indeed there is an obstruction. It's in the box itself. It looks like some kind of insulating blanket or something came loose internally. I don't know if it came from where the heater core was and it just worked its way in here or what. So I'm going to attempt to reach in there and get it out. I have a tool, with one of them grabby things on the end of it that might be able to grab it and pull it out. I have a feeling that when I touch it or try to grab it, it's probably going to disintegrate, and then I should just be able to stick a hose in there, a vacuum hose, and just vacuum it out. At least I hope so. But it is definitely a physical obstruction that's at the bottom of this chamber, and I know you can't really see it, but with a flashlight I was able to see that there's definitely a blockage at the end of it. So I'm going to work on clearing that now. All right, I was able to pull the hose off, and now you can actually see the obstruction that's there. And I touched it with my finger, my bare finger, and feels very soft, like it's probably going to disintegrate as soon as I try and touch it. So I'm just going to get my shop vac out and see if I can just vacuum it out in pieces and see how that goes. All right, my shop vac made very short work of that obstruction in there. It was just some of that foam rubber insulation stuff that Ford used a lot of inside these components. So I just started the car, and now air blows out of that vent like it should. So that turned out to be not too bad. I'm going to actually start the car and let you watch this thing operate, because you can actually see the flapper in there moving with the vacuum motor. So I'm going to put this mic down. Hold on. Flashlight in there. Let's see. Let's see, where did my mic go? You should still be able to hear me. Right now, the flapper valve is closed, so as soon as I start the car, I've already got the air conditioning system set to start, so you'll see it opens. All right, so I've got my flashlight sitting there so you can see inside that plenum there, so I want you to see the valve open as soon as I start it, because the air conditioning system is set to start. There you saw it open, and now air is actually flowing out of there. Before it was blocked by that disintegrated foam rubber stuff. Now if I turn the car back off, it'll close as the vacuum goes away, and there you see it. So we're done with that. So that wasn't too bad. All right, one last thing before I wrap it up for the day. I intentionally have left this front cover off because I'm going to be replacing the clock anyway, so no point in doing extra work, so I'm just leaving it off. I did replace my one burned out dash light there for when the headlights are on. I discovered something too interesting. I wanted to see if there was actually air coming out underneath these little tiny floor vents. Here's one right there, the end of the hose that hooks into that for the floor portion of the air conditioning. That little bit that comes out on the floor, which is kind of a cool feature. I discovered that when this sensor right here that you see hanging out is not plugged in, it will not direct the air out of the air conditioning. That sensor is obviously working and is part of the system, and if it's not there, it doesn't work. And it wanted to send out heat on the bottom, so I had to plug that back in after I removed it from the panel that's over here. And then while I'm down there, I discovered that there's a hose sitting down here. It's cracked. It's a vacuum hose. I think that might be for my vacuum trunk release. I'm not sure, but it's cracked, so it looks like I've got another vacuum line I'm going to have to deal with. So I decided that, I've done enough for today, so I'm just wrapping it up for the day. Have a nice evening.